Hello, Diva family. We have achieved episode 14, and once again, it features a dear psychedelic sister. I've known Wendy Tucker so long that I don't remember the first time I met her, but it was most likely at her home in Marin County, where she was hosting an ongoing psychedelic event called Friday Night Dinners. These dinners have achieved epic status in the psychedelic history books. These early dinners were the ways that the deeply underground psychedelic community back in the day used to come together and share information in a safe, secure environment. As the daughter of Ann Shulgin and John Perry, Wendy was the natural heir to these dinners when her father died. I showed up in the late 90s and attended many a psychedelic potluck at Wendy's beautiful home. Many people have done many things to move the psychedelic world forward, but I feel it's safe to say that nobody has done more dishes in service of the psychedelic cause. So let me tell you more about Wendy. As the daughter of psychedelic pioneer Ann Shulgin, Wendy Tucker comes from psychedelic royalty. She worked for many years with renowned psychedelic chemist Sasha Shulgin, doing research, working with him in the lab, and running Transform Press, the publishing company that the Shulgins created. Wendy has spearheaded the effort to preserve the Shulgin Farm, the home of Sasha and Ann, and the location of Sasha's historic lab. She created the Shulgin Foundation in 2023, a nonprofit dedicated to this preservation effort. Like her mother, her husband, and her daughter, Wendy is an artist while also managing a chiropractic office. Welcome to Psychedelic Divas, Wendy. It is such a pleasure to have you here.
It's so good to be here, Carla. Thank you.
So let's start at our beginning. As I mentioned, and I'm pretty sure I met you at your home at one of your many Friday night dinners. I give full credit to those dinners for introducing me to the psychedelic community that I now count as dear friends. Can you give us a little historic backstory to these dinners? I mentioned they
Yeah.
started. Well, I'll just let you tell us.
Yeah.
So,
Well, they started, so a little back, I'll back up a little. My parents separated when I was young, but my mom and dad stayed very friendly, and it was good imprinting on us kids. You know, you can stay friends with your exes. And when mom met Sasha in the it was 79, 78, 79. She started spending more and more time over there. So we started what we called the Wednesday night dinners at that time. Just get the family together. My dad would come. Actually, we lived right across the street from him. He was way up the hill. We were way down the hill from the main road. My dad would come over. Mom and Sasha would come over. My brother was there. I think my sister was off to school already, to college. And we started getting together for dinner every week, every Wednesday night. And then it started to be like, oh, let's invite some more people and a little extended family. There was a friend who was living at the house at the time, and his kids would come too. And so it started to sort of grow and grow. And we switched it to Sunday night dinners for a little while because Wednesdays were getting it's a little hard, especially driving back and forth from Lafayette, I think, for Sasha and mom, and went to Wednesday night dinners and ultimately ended on Friday night dinners. And this happened over a few years, and it was just kept growing and growing, extended family, friends, colleagues. And so then when mom really moved in with Sasha to Lafayette, and my brother and I moved up with my father in the original house that we grew up in. That's where the Friday night dinners happened. That's where I met you. His house in Larkspur is still there. My brother's living there. But he had those dinners every other week for years. And then it went to once a month, I believe. But it was amazing. Sometimes we'd have 100, 120 people in the house. Just, it just kept growing and growing. And people from NASA, Buzz Aldrin came one time. It was like all sorts of weird stories about people that were showing up that nobody quite knew who they were. So of course, you always think the DEA agent is one of them.
We were pretty much told to expect that anybody you talk to could be a DEA agent. And there were, by the time I showed up, there were a few rules. One was you needed to be invited. So, and that the person who was inviting you needed to come with them. You couldn't just come on your own and just show up. So your inviter had to be with you, and they were supposed to introduce the new people to you so that you knew where these strangers were coming from.
Right.
And even though it was a potluck, so that was another rule. So you needed to contribute. And even though these were psychedelic potlucks, no psychedelics were allowed. It was a drug-free, keep the house safe rule. So there was do no drugs and no drug deals.
Right.
So
that's right.
those were the rules. So the drug of choice was red wine.
Yeah.
Back in the day, there was a lot of $2 chuck happening.
That's right. Yeah. Dude, so I don't know if Mom would get up at the beginning of some of the dinners, and that's probably where you heard the rules laid down, was Mom getting up and saying, no drugs, no drug dealing, no conspiring to deal drugs, right? But, people have to realize, and I'm sure there's some listeners that are really young and don't even know that in the 90s, if a police officer came to that house and somebody was just smoking a joint,
right,
we would get our house taken away. I mean, the whole property would be seized by law enforcement. I mean, this was a real thing. So it was, yeah, it was a little scary. I mean, in that way.
Yeah, I think it was probably terrifying at times to be as open as you were in those days. I mean, and I talk about it on my first podcast that, for decades I kept everything locked down, and it was terrifying for me to come out, last year with my personal use. So I can't even imagine what it was like as above ground as you and your family were. There were real threats to livelihood, to homes.
Yeah, we always assumed the phones were tapped.
Yeah.
And which felt silly, but then at the same time, it's like, no, it's real. This happens. People are tapping phones. Law enforcement is tapping phones and listening to conversations. And so I did, I mean, Sasha came into my life, I was 18 or so, 17, 18. So I'd already been doing my own experimenting, my own research into these things. But that sense of having to have that extra layer of being super careful and realizing that there was a lot at stake. This wasn't just about me and what I was doing and who I'm talking with about. I mean, it is about the whole family now. Yeah, the Friday night dinners were amazing. I mean, we had such great casts of characters, and it would get so crowded in the kitchen in my dad's house. He had the deck is an amazing outdoor space. So a good, how many, 70 people could be out on the deck.
It's a big deck, but not in winter.
Not in winter. That's right. Yeah. The dinners were amazing. I only remember one potluck when everybody pretty much brought dessert. Otherwise it was a pretty good spread too. It was a great event. I mean, it was really the one place a lot of people could come and talk about this and feel safe and secure and with like-minded people. And, and Mom and Sasha had their Easter and 4th of July parties, which were a regular yearly event as well. But the Friday night dinners were so frequent. It was just a really special thing. And, some people took it up, and we had a couple of people in the community that had Friday night dinners at their house. We tried that out. It started to sort of disperse. And after my dad passed in 98, we kept them going. That's when I met you. After that,
yes, right.
We kept them going for a while. I love that, these sorts of salons happen, and they should continue to happen. It's this one-to-one contact. People need to be in community, need to be with each other.
They were not networking events because there was no business to network.
No, that's right.
nobody had a card that this is my psychedelic business. I'm doing this and that. You know, it
Right,
was like, I mean,
right.
the people who were in business were the drug dealers.
Right. Yeah. And then you had the therapists and you had some
But
scientists, some
still, people
doctors.
weren't. There were some scientists, that's absolutely.
Yeah.
But and the doc, but the therapist, that was underground. People weren't
Yeah.
necessarily, they weren't. It wasn't on a card.
No, 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 not that kind of therapy. Yeah, you're right. It wasn't a networking event at all. It was purely social.
And that's what was so great about it.
Yes. Yeah.
But it was also
Mhm.
the opportunity for you hear someone talk about a compound you didn't know, and you'd be like, "Wait, what's that?" And they'd be like, "Oh, you know," and they would describe it, or it would be in, oh, we'll get to the books later, but it would have
Mhm.
been in one of Ann and Sasha's books, P call and T call. They'd say, "Oh, it's in the back. It's this compound," and
Mhm.
but you could talk to them about their experience. What was your dose on that? What did you do? Did you layer it with anything? What? Oh,
Mhm.
that was bad. Don't do that. I mean, those
Yeah,
were
right.
that was critical pieces of information,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that's really how, you know, I learned a lot, and learned how to keep myself and my friends safe, learned how
Mhm.
to explore new things. And so, I mean,
Right.
those dinners were, so it was about friends and community
Mhm.
and psychedelic details, you know, that you
Mhm.
were there it was pre-internet.
Yes, that's right. It really was. Yeah.
You couldn't Google this
Mm.
stuff, people.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, you had to go get a book or
Right.
talk to somebody who knew what they were talking about. That's
And the
right.
people who wrote the book were at the dinners.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
So it was critical for me. I mean, it's really, it's how I met the psychedelic community who I'm, you know, I've been a part of for
Mm.
these past several decades. So I really want to
Mhm.
thank you for
Oh, good. Yes.
for your role and all
Yeah.
those dishes.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. When I met my friend Peter, who I've been working with on this preservation project. You know, I was telling stories, and yeah, he was. I think it was him. He had the idea of making a T-shirt, you know, about
Because I said that
humanity.
we
Yeah,
were talking together, and I said, this
that's
woman has
right.
done a lot of dishes in service of the community. Because
Yeah,
I
no paper
remember
plates.
so often, I know, I can envision you. So you know, your father's house, you know, the deck isn't printed on me, the kitchen, but so much of the kitchen isn't printed on me. I know where the wine was. I know where the sink
Right?
was, but it's you standing at the sink doing the
Yeah,
dishes.
I know. It really kind of was my favorite place to be. It's funny. I had so many great conversations, and I am one of these people like to keep my hands busy, you know. And it was just, yeah, it was my sense of this is something I'm doing for everyone. I don't know. It's good to be in service, you know,
Yes.
and that it's really true. So whether it's dishes or whatever, it all
All right. Well,
matters.
that was one of your roles. There's many. We'll get to more, but we're talking about roles. How would you describe the roles that Ann and Sasha played in psychedelic history,
Oh,
and why do you think they were each so suited to their roles?
mm. Well, Sasha was such an incredible alchemist, really. You know, um, his purpose was to create novel compounds, and he enjoyed taking things. Actually, his favorite one was LSD. You know, when he wasn't
Mine too.
trying something else, but he created so many compounds and tried them on himself, gave them to my mom and the research group. Everybody wrote reports. This is what his service he was doing for the world,
Hmm.
because all he was doing was just capturing those first over 200 compounds that he could had time to create, but also leaving clues for other chemists to go
Hmm.
forward and create more, because these are all just scaffoldings for other things to be created from. So, uh, yeah, he was an incredible chemist, a great scientist, a really funny person. And my mom had such a profound knowledge of Jungian psychology from her own research, her own, I would say, her own experience in some ways, and just her own reading about it. My father was a Jungian analyst. He studied with Carl Jung. So when they were together, I'm sure there was a lot of more information that she got from talking with him, but she just was very well read and really understood the profound impact that doing these compounds had on a person and how you could utilize that for therapy. So her work with these some of these compounds, especially MDMA and 2CB, it was groundbreaking. I mean, she wasn't the first one to be doing it, but I think her contribution to that field was profound. And then writing about it,
Absolutely, without question. So you
that's
mentioned the research group. So let's go back to that, okay?
yeah.
Because that is another piece of psychedelic history that needs to be honored and acknowledged. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and then who was part of it? Maybe who has passed? Maybe you might be able to share.
Well, the
some names.
Stolroffs, Myron and Jean Stolroff, and if people don't know who they are, they should look them up. Stolroff. Myron and Jean were dear, dear friends of Ann and Sasha, and so were Phyllis and Dale Gross. They were also they had been in at Berkeley with Sasha, so they went way back. They were part of the research group. There were others. There was about 8 or 10 people, and they weren't always all of them together trying a new compound. Sometimes there was only 6 or 8. I don't really know the details fully, but that was a serious group. They trusted each other implicitly, and they knew that if they were being given a new compound, that Sasha was giving that to them to try, that they could trust it because Sasha had already done he ran through that, him and Ann, and gone through all the steps to make sure that it was safe and that they were trying a safe level. So they did their experiences, their experiments, and wrote their reports.
So this was at the farm? So people would come to the farm?
Usually the farm, but they also sometimes were at other people's places. But the farm, I've found pictures of people outside laying down in the sun, and you just see it. I mean, it's very clear they're experimenting on something. And so the farm was the place that it was the regular place for people to come and try the compounds. Yeah, I know they spent some time in Lone Pine as well at the Stolroff property. But that research group it was small, it was intimate, they trusted each other, and they wrote amazing reports and sent them all to Sasha. He kept them all in these pharmacology notebooks that are at the farm. And those were really important. It's an amazing collection of material of Sasha's drawings of the compound, and then his experiences trying them out, with detailed like, is it a +1, +2? He had this rating scale, +1, +2, +3, +4. I've seen a couple of them where they were +4. That's when you're really like communing with God. I mean, you're yeah. So, but yeah, the research group I think there's a couple of people who are still with us, maybe quite elderly, but what an amazing thing. What an amazing contribution that they've made to this field.
Was Leo Zeff part of it? I know Myron Stolroff's his biggest contribution that's I think most well known would be writing the book The Secret Chief, which was about Leo Zeff, who was the underground therapist who, did so much to bring the compounds to the therapeutic world, and detailing how he did it, which I think was what was so important, because it was in such a high integrity way, in such a thorough description of this is how you do psychedelic therapy.
Yeah. He, I don't know if you know the story that he was getting ready to retire. He was done. He was burnt out and depressed and not doing well. And then Sasha gave him MDMA and said, "I would like you to try this. This is something that is just come into my orbit." This was right before Mom came into the picture, I believe. And Leo tried it and went out of retirement. He's like, "This is an incredible tool.
Right.
Oh, it was something, it's like he'd been waiting for something like this. And he trained hundreds of people how to
He
do.
trained, I speak about Ralph Metzner, but I have another teacher who's still alive, and we don't say her name, but she was trained by Leo.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he had an incredible way of working and was such a sweet person. I'd met him a few times. He was just a really lovely, genuine, heartfelt human.
And
So,
again, just speaking to the secrecy in the underground, the book is called The Secret Chief.
mm,
Nobody knew who it was until Leo
mhm,
died. I mean, so
mhm.
we are speaking of a very different time, and yet it was it wasn't that long ago.
I know. Things have changed
Yeah. Hmm.
really fast. The past 10 years? Oh my gosh.
Crazy. Yeah.
Really crazy. Yeah. I mean, even just 20 years ago, yeah, you didn't really talk about this openly as much. I mean, but yeah, Sasha and Ann were really well suited, really well paired, I should say. They were a
Yes.
great couple because Sasha was such the scientist, such the chemist. He had his own spiritual side, but he didn't talk about it. He didn't like to talk about that so much. He didn't want to put words to it, I think. I think it was just his own very private feelings about his spirituality. But mom was the person who would talk about the psychology and the
Yep.
spirituality and how these compounds helped to open these worlds. And this was Sasha's whole thing, was to find tools for the mind, find tools to open up these different parts of our minds. Really important work. Really
Really,
important
really
work.
important work. And I think people throw the word icon around a lot, but they were truly both psychedelic icons.
Mm,
There's no question about that.
yeah.
Uh, so let's go back into your personal history. So you said, I think you said you were 18 when your mom met Sasha. Is that
Yeah, 17, 18.
17, 18?
Yeah.
So what did you first think when you met him? He's kind of a
Well,
wild character.
yeah, when I first met him, I actually remember being in the house that we were living in at the time, the A-frame house, where we started the Wednesday night dinners. I remember him coming into the living room, meeting him for the first time, having a little interaction with him, and being a little like, I'm not sure. Being a little like, hmm, a little protective. I didn't really get his sense of humor. He goes, I know you remember how he is. He was a very funny person, but very dry,
Very dry.
very dry sense of humor. I loved his wordplay and stuff, but I just, being that teenager person, I was like,
Hmm.
not really sure about him. But it took a little time, and then I started to understand
Hmm.
him more. And oh my gosh, to see my mom so happy
Nice.
and coming into
Yes.
herself in the way that she did,
Hmm.
yeah, I knew that this was good. Yeah. So Sasha, yeah, he would come over. We would go over there, but not as often. They were a little more private,
Hmm.
unless there was an event happening or something going on. And now, reading back in some of the pharmacology notebooks, I can see why.
Why they were being private? Like, no, we'd rather
Yeah,
not have the kids over here.
they were really working. I mean, they
Right.
were trying compounds, making compounds,
Hmm.
lecturing, traveling. I mean, busy, busy. And
Yeah.
then writing books. I mean,
Right.
writing P-Call and T-Call. Yeah, P-Call, they started in the late 80s.
Hmm.
It was published in 91.
And
So it's
PCAL
P-Call.
stands for phenethylamines I have known and loved.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us a little bit about, because it's a very unique book. Both TCAL, tryptamines I have known and loved. Both
Yes.
PCAL and TCAL are very different books.
Yeah.
So can you
Yeah.
speak about a little bit about them?
Well, P-Call, a chemical love story. So it is the love story. It's the
Hmm.
story of mom meeting Sasha, and they were involved in a pretty intense love triangle.
Hmm.
Sasha was in love with somebody else, and it took a lot for mom to hang in there and kind of be patient and watch him go through this process of realizing that this woman was not going to leave her husband, that she was, giving him a lot of promises, but not coming through with them. And it was very painful for her. But she hung in and she knew it would be worth it. And it was. So Pikal it's an immense book. It looks very, very daunting, looking at it, but people need to realize that only half of it is the story. The other half is all chemistry and recipes.
It's the cookbook.
It's the cookbook. But the story is really fun, and there's some great stuff in there. Chapter 42, I think, is lecture at the university, and that was like the Why I Do What I Do lecture that he did. Oh my goodness, just that is such a brilliant piece of writing and so moving about why he's doing this work. So yeah, Pikal is the love story. And Tikal gets more into just, it's almost like travel notes, and it's a little more disjointed in that it's not a cohesive story. It's got great writing too, and great stories and good philosophy. But yeah, one is phenethylamines and one is tryptamines. So the cookbooks, the recipes in the back are very different. And so we were working on the third book, which was going to be isoquinolines and other things. There was a little array of things, but it's on hold now because there's not as much chemistry, but there was some writing that they didn't weave into Pikal and Tikal. So we do have a third book that eventually we'll get around to publishing.
So while we're still talking personally, did you ever get the drug talk from your mom? And if so, how did that go?
Well, the drug talk, my mom's drug talk when I was a teenager was, if you ever want to try anything and you ever want to smoke pot, just come home and try it, which was great. I didn't do that. I definitely just did it on my own. And, but it sent a really important message to us kids that these things aren't bad. It's not to not do them. It's just that you want to do them in the right container. You want to do them in the right context. You want to be safe. The
right dose.
The right dose with the right people.
Hey, fellow explorers. Thoughtful planning and preparation is the foundation of any successful psychedelic journey. And if something does go wrong, knowing how to navigate that difficult space is essential. That's why I wrote my psychedelic safety guide, including what to do when things go wrong. It's filled with tips and tools for keeping you and your friends as safe as possible. You'll find it at our website, psychedelicdivas.com. Please, go get it, read it, and share it. The more we all know, the safer we can keep each other. Thanks.
So just by her kind of offering that and suggesting that, it sent a very interesting message to us. I found that, let's just say that I didn't take her up on that offer. I was just talking to my daughter actually recently about this. I said, it's interesting if Mom had come to me and said, let's try this together, let's do this together. How would that have been?
Right.
So I was kind of going down that path of, and we didn't do that then. I'm curious. I don't know the answer. I'm curious how that would have been to actually my first time try something with her.
Right.
But I did get the opportunity to experiment a little.
That's my next question. What medicines did you do with your mom and Sasha, and what was that like?
I got to experiment with a little bit of his new compounds. There was one called proscaline. I found a report on that. I didn't even remember that one, but some of the 2C compounds, MDMA, of course, some of the MDMA analogs, MDMA was one of them.
And so were you doing them as part of the research group, or walk us through some of these, the setting,
Well, with these situations, it was not with the research group per se. It was me being at the farm with Mom and Sasha. doing this with them. It was always very ceremonious. You'd have your cup and everybody clinks cups and does it, and then spend some time just bopping around. And then when things start happening, you're with everyone. And you always write a report. You always write up what your experiences were. So I don't think I ever did that anywhere else but the farm. That was the place. It was a very wonderful, safe container. And being with them, of course, was really special, to be in an altered state with your mom.
Right.
And it was lovely. It was a really, really special experience. Mom did love MDMA. That was really her favorite. She called it her writing drug, actually. It was,
I know.
yeah. So she, she was a wonderful person to be with in that altered state. She was just such a warm, lovely person. And Sasha was just hysterical. I mean, it was just, what a sweet heart that man had, There weren't a lot of people around. In my memory, a couple of times that I did that there weren't a lot of people around. Once I was with a boyfriend, but it was nice to have that intimate setting, So, yeah, my contribution.
Your contribution. You have research papers, trip reports.
Trip reports.
Well, I want to speak a little bit to Sasha's method for trying out novel compounds, because so he would synthesize something and then he tried it on himself. And actually, what we haven't spoken to is Sasha is the godfather of MDMA. So can you just give, for those who are like, I still don't know who this person is.
Yeah.
Tell us about Sasha's contribution to the world regarding MDMA, which he did not initially synthesize, but tell us how he brought MDMA to the world.
Yeah, it is important, an important distinction that he did not create MDMA. I mean, people call him the godfather of it because there was actually a student who came to him and introduced this to him and said, "Oh, you might want to try this. This is an interesting compound." And so he resynthesized MDMA, and he called it
working where at that point?
At the farm. I believe this was still he was at the farm because he worked for Dow Chemical in the 60s. And when he left Dow, he set up camp at the farm.
Right.
It was actually the original house at the farm was where the lab is. And the lab is in the old basement of the original house, which burned down in the 50s. So he took that space that was this cinder block little basement space and put lab equipment in there and set up camp and did all his work in there. It's an incredible tiny space with an open fireplace. When I was working in the lab with him, it was always funny. Like, we're making a fire. It's like, yeah, I mean, he's been doing this for years. I trust him. Nothing's going to explode. It's okay.
So he resynthesized MDMA.
Resynthesized.
Did what?
And then realized what potential it was.
Personally.
Called it his low-calorie martini.
That's the biggest thing, right? That's to me is Sasha's biggest contribution. There's all the compounds he made, but then he personally tested them.
Yes, right. Yeah, he wouldn't give anything to anybody without him having it first. Yeah, never. He had such ethics around the way he worked. He was going to make sure that if he gave something to somebody that he created, it went through a thorough process of his own. But MDMA was such a friendly compound. And, as we said before, he gave it to Leo Zeff not long after he had resynthesized it. So, it was used for so many years underground by therapists.
Beautiful work. Yeah.
Beautiful work. Such an amazing tool for therapy. My mom used it too, sometimes with a booster of 2CB, which Sasha did create. And that was a very powerful combination when they had a client or a patient who had trouble breaking through whatever wall was there. The 2CB would really help kind of open all that up. And But Sasha, he resynthesized it, made it, gave it to therapists. He would make it regularly and give it to the therapist. He never sold anything. He didn't make money off of anything, but he supplied, he got the ingredients and supplied a lot of therapists. And until it ended up on the street and the dance scene and the electronic dance community took to MDMA like nothing else. Because, well, what's funny is when we were first hearing about people dancing on MDMA, I remember very well our inside group was like, how could anybody do that? Because we're just used to getting in a puddle and being like really cozy and warm and, you know, trying not to let our teeth clench too hard.
Right.
Oh God, it's so terrible. Yeah, it was hard to imagine dancing on something like that, but oh my goodness, it is fun to dance on.
But turns out both communities are right.
Yes, exactly. But it really, boy, when it ended up on the streets and in the dance community, we could see the writing on the wall. That was a hard time. I remember that. Mom and Sasha were really sad to see what happened with MDMA. Right. They tried hard to fight against that law and keep the research open for it. But yeah, now we're coming back around full circle.
We'll see where this is going to end up.
Yeah.
So I want to speak. Sasha told a story once. I don't remember what conference I was at or wherever, but he told the story of how he would try novel compounds. And so, you know, he would start something, and he always started with a very small dose. And then he would make notes, and then he would, you know, work up to the next dose, and then he would make notes, and he had to have days in between and clearing, and he had to have a life, right? And he was driving to Stanford, and he was doing these other things. And so, you know, every day or every other day, I don't know what the schedule was, but he was trying something, and he never knew when it was going to hit, okay, or what the result might be. Like all of a sudden he might be nauseous, or he might be really high, or and he had no way of knowing what that timing was going to be or what was going to happen. And so he learned, you know, the farm is in the East Bay. He might be driving to the South Bay. He had to cross the Bay Bridge. So he said that one of the things that he learned was that there was and to cross the Bay Bridge is like, I don't know, 12 lanes merging into 3. So he learned there was one lane that had no merging. And if he could stay in that lane, and if he should happen to hit in that moment, okay, where he couldn't pull over because he's in the middle of 12 lanes of traffic and everyone's trying to go to work or whatever was happening. So he knew the one lane, and he could stay in that lane until he could pull off at Treasure Island and, you know, like reconnoiter or decide what he was going to do or whatever. But I always remember that it was like must have had so many different like backup plans for, you know, how do I live my life for when in any moment I might be like totally overwhelmed by some novel compound that all of a sudden it's like, okay, that's the active dose.
Dose right
Good
there.
or bad.
Yeah. I like to think that he was a little more careful than that. But you know,
I think that's how he was careful.
I know, it's really the Wild West, you know. I mean,
yes.
True psychonaut. I mean, into the unknown, like truly. And it's true. I mean, he was working all the time. You know, he was either in the lab or in the office or at UCSF or lecturing somewhere or teaching at Berkeley. I mean, he was working all the time. So yeah, when did he have time to experiment on all these things he was creating? Yeah, in between. That's nuts.
He slotted it in. So you mentioned earlier that you worked with Sasha in his lab. So I mean, tell us about that. Like, what was your role, and what's that experience like? I mean, that's such insider information.
Well, I had been traveling quite a bit in Asia and selling jewelry. I was quite a gypsy for a little while there, and so when after Pikal was published in '91, I remember reading that for the first time. I was in Japan selling jewelry on the street in Japan, and I was reading that in my apartment that I was sharing with many people, and such an incredible book. And came home not long after and realized it was time to start transitioning to being back in the States more because I'd been traveling for quite a bit. So Sasha needed help in the office. He said he could use a hand. And so I started working with him part-time, going from Larkspur over to Lafayette and working in the office. And then he would bring me into the lab and work with him there. Now, I'm not a chemist, but he's such a good teacher. He was such a good teacher and so patient, so nice about showing me everything. And if I didn't understand something, just he was very gentle. Yeah, and it was really just an extra pair of hands, whether it was washing glassware or swirling things, or he did teach me how to make something once, but it was fun to be in there with him because he would, I remember going, like getting to the farm, walking down the path, getting to the lab. He'd switch on the lights, put on the classical music, light the fire, like, okay, here we go, you know, and he was so happy in there. He was always so happy. And I've said it before, but I never can say it enough. Like this thing always sticks in my mind that he said, it's like, you never learn by things going right. You can only really learn by things going wrong and then trying again. And so that was such his philosophy in the lab. And it's such a philosophy for life, you know. But that's sort of, yeah, I mean, if you do something wrong or something happens, like, well, it's just part of the learning process, you know. So working in the lab with him was really great. I really wish I was a chemist. I wish I had that mind, but as try as I may, it takes a different kind of mind than mine, because I would have had the most amazing teacher right there, you know, and he was a great teacher, but that wasn't my department. But, you know, whether it was working in the lab with him or working in the office doing research and running the book business, and it was just lovely being around him. And yeah, even in the office too, there's just endless amounts to do, as there always is. Just helping him with the research, researching the next book or whatever paper he was writing, or yeah, I mean, that's when I got into running Transform Press, was just doing the daily operations for that. And then I helped them out with the second book, Tea Call, was sort of the project manager on that. And now I own the business. When Sasha was starting to fail in around 2010, they just transferred the business over to me because I'd been running it for over 20 years anyway. Those books are amazing. And so anyway, I'm getting off topic, but you asking how it was.
It's all on topic.
Yeah.
Well, I think the first time that I actually met Sasha and Ann, the first time I remember really meeting them was at the Palenque, Mexico conference in 1999, where I actually got to hang out by the pool with them. And they both did presentations there. And I was going to skip the chemistry, one. I was like, oh, I'm not going to watch the chemistry one. And everybody was like, no, because everybody was so excited. It's Sasha this afternoon. And I was like, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do. And everyone was like, no, you have to go. It's the way he describes it. And so I did. And it was out by the pool. And, he had a whiteboard and he was drawing what he called dirty pictures, which is, when he would draw the molecules. But the way he described it, I could follow, I could understand.
It's amazing.
And that to me was an amazing gift.
Yeah.
And it was true. It was one of the highlights of the conference. And so my little liberal arts brain stepped into the chemistry and started to be willing to know the names of molecules and to be able to pronounce phenethylamine and tryptamines and to know the different families. And that is because of Sasha. And your mother, she, I just was so impressed also by her presentation, which was all about the therapeutic uses of the medicines and shadow work. I mean, she was that was just a big part of all of her conversations and presentations. And so really, I was blown away by both of those. In a pretty epic conference, they were very much to the stars. But so much of that was because of their warmth and their approachability, and that's just how they were in the community. So the farm had a very open and welcoming environment. So you mentioned they had regular open house events on 4th of July and Easter, always a potluck.
Yeah.
Always fascinating array of psychedelic characters floating through. I went to many of those before they passed. And in fact, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to share a photo of myself in Sasha's lab. So
Nice.
what was that like to have that as part of your family history? I mean, you've spoken to that, but like when you're out in the world back then, and people are like, well, what do you do? It's like, this was your world. What was that really like for you?
Well, it's interesting, depending on who I was talking to, I wouldn't always say, right? Because
Right.
one never knows how somebody's going to feel about psychedelics because if they don't know and all they know is all the scary stuff. And I certainly don't want to make somebody else uncomfortable. I don't want to make myself uncomfortable. So sometimes I would dance around it because, it didn't seem necessary to just be out with it, really. I understood the gravity and the importance of what Sasha was doing from very, soon after I met him. I really started to understand, this is really important work that he's doing. And especially after they published, it's like, oh boy, okay. So how did it feel? It just feels like part of, to me, in a way. But I feel really honored to be connected to it because there's something about, I've been really doing this a lot lately, thinking about 100 years, 200 years in the future and the impact that all of this work now is how people are going to look back at this time. I mean, we right here, right now, are making, we're part of this history. We're part of the future archives.
Right.
And so, so the work that Ann and Sasha were doing was laying this foundation that other people are going to grow from. They truly were the seed crystals of this movement, right? And so being connected to that feels like an honor. I don't know what else to say about it. It doesn't feel, I don't feel special or anything about it, but I feel honored. I guess that's the only word I can come up with. I mean, even still, I'm careful about telling people really what I do. I'm getting better at it, but there is this place in me, I guess it's the training of being really careful about how you talk about these things. And it's a hard thing to get over, and it's a hard habit to break,
I completely understand.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, so let's circle back to the farm and its historic significance.
Yeah.
When your mom died, you made the decision to create the Shulgin Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to the preservation of the farm and Sasha's lab. So I think you might have started talking about that, like you feel honored. This is maybe your honoring of that. But what made you decide, I mean, why not just sell the property and...
As the executor of the family trust, it was sort of on me to make sure that my siblings and I get our inheritance. And it just, from the get-go, and we talked about it a lot before Mom passed, but she could never really envision what she wanted necessarily. She knew she wanted the place to be preserved in some way or something, but she didn't have a solid vision about it. So it was really up to us to figure that out. But yeah, when she passed, I went to the family and I said, we can't just sell the property. I mean, this is an incredible legacy. This is an incredible place, so much history here. So let's take some time and see how we can work this and preserve it, because the preservation feels very important. I mean, there was talk about taking the lab and picking up the lab and transferring it somewhere else. I mean, giving it to the Smithsonian. I mean, there was all sorts of talk about the lab going somewhere to be preserved. But to me, it's like the whole place. I mean, all the research group working there, all the community gatherings that happened there. It was such a hub and such an important place for people. I just couldn't see letting it go and just selling it on the market. So everybody was in full support. Families in full support of it. I thought it was going to take just a year or so, but it's taken a little longer, but that's okay. So we're doing it right. And I met Peter Vitale, who I've been working with for the past 2 years now. He and I went through all sorts of iterations of how we could preserve the property without doing a nonprofit. But we ended up creating the nonprofit because it's the most recognizable format. It's really it's important for people donating to have that tax deduction, all of that. So we created the Shulgin Farm nonprofit, but really it's the Shulgin Foundation is what it's called. ShulginFoundation.org is where people can go if they want to see and learn more about that. But after Mom passed, I just knew that this needed to stay. And again, I'm thinking about 100 years, 200 years down the road and thinking, wow, people coming to the farm and seeing this tiny little like mad scientist laboratory.
Tiny mad scientist laboratory is exactly the description.
Wow. It's such an amazing place. And even though it's gotten a little cleaned up, it's still just as it was and feels just like Sasha could walk in at any point and be working in there, you know. The preservation project has been a lot. It's been good. It's been growing slowly. We have a great, small, mighty team of people. I'm just so grateful for the people that I'm working with because they're really making this possible. It's a lot. I didn't set out to run a nonprofit, but here I am. And we're having events at the farm now and classes, and that's growing. There's meetings, some company meetings that are happening there as well. So it really is a place for the community, and that's what I felt like I wanted to do. And everybody was in agreement. It's like, this place is and should be for the community. It's not going to be a museum.
Right. And so I know there's a lot happening there, but so what's the best way for people to get plugged into what's happening at the farm, or, you know, get involved, obviously contribute, but is it all at, what's the...
ShulginFoundation.org. And they can get on the mailing list through the website, and they'll get notifications of things that are coming, or things that are happening, and events, and all the news. As time goes on, it's just building nice and slow. And there's a big mycology workshop coming up really soon, actually, that's happening there this weekend. And it feels really special for people to come who've never been to the farm, to come for the first time and realize that this is where all of that happened, and to attend an event or a class there is
or a cleanup,
wonderful, or a cleanup or volunteer day. Yes,
I've shoveled.
yeah. The volunteer days have been really helpful because, gosh, my brother and I've been doing a lot of the work there, just trying to get the place kind of. There's a lot of deferred maintenance. As you can imagine, Mom and Sasha were busy doing other things. Slowly but surely, the place is getting fixed up. And as I was saying, I really felt like, you know, making a museum didn't feel right. So the vision is that, like, even this Thursday, there's going to be a meeting in the living room. The different rooms in the house will be used by people. And not just the big barn structure that's on the property, which is sort of our event space, let alone the grounds, which is just, the grounds are lovely.
They are.
But the whole place is there for people to meet and utilize and learn from each other and do what was always happening there, which is sharing information, basically. Education, information, Sasha and Mom, and community. It's so important to have a place for the community. And there's so few places. You know, especially with a history like this. So I'm glad that it's happening. It's real. People, when they hear about it, they get it right away. They get the importance of it. So I'm optimistic, and I'm really optimistic, and feel that over time we're creating something it's going to be around for a long time. And so I'm happy with the way it's going.
Awesome. Beautiful.
Yeah. But ShulginFoundation.org, people can learn a lot about the Shulgins if they don't know about the Shulgins. They can go there.
There's so much, like if someone just Googled Ann and Sasha Shulgin, they would be overwhelmed as to but like I could do this, I could do that, I could read this, but like, so like if I like the primer, what would you recommend as the best way to dive into their work? What books, websites, movies?
Yeah, definitely go to shulginfoundation.org because there's a good synopsis of who they were and what the farm is. So there's a good place to start. There's Pikal, A Chemical Love Story, tells their story. I mean, it's funny. My brother and my name are the only names that weren't changed in that book. It's so funny. And then there's a couple of movies. The first movie that was made is called Dirty Pictures, because as you mentioned, that's what Sasha would call his chemical structures when he would draw them on the chalkboard. He called them Dirty Pictures. So Dirty Pictures, I'm sure you can rent it now, or at least find it on YouTube, if nothing else. And then Better Living Through Chemistry is the most recent film. Connie Littlefield did that one, and it is a beautiful film. That is also now available on different streaming platforms.
Great.
So that's a great way to learn about the Shulgins as well.
Perfect.
And then there's Arrowwood, of course. The Arrowwoods are amazing.
That's the deep dive.
Whew, the Arrowwoods have done so much work, and they've been amazing. I'm in awe of them, really, and the work that they've done. It's incredible. And they've really helped us with the archiving because, Ann and Sasha were prolific. Sasha was just an incredible amount of information that man gathered and produced. Oh my goodness. So now it's all been scanned. It's all been digitized. The
Shulgin
archives
Vault. That's what you're searching for.
On Arrowwood.
On Arrowwood, the Shulgin Vault.
That's right. And so they've done an incredible job gathering all that information. And a lot is not on the Shulgin Vault yet because, of course, it's just been scanned and not redacted yet, right? But they've been instrumental in helping us.
They are still working.
Still working on it.
Yeah. It's a deep dive.
It's a lot.
You're right. Totally. I always honor the Arrowwoods, but
I know.
But I'm always happy. And y'all, it's not cheap. It costs money to do these things. So arrowwood.org, also a nonprofit, and so worth your contribution. So all of this will be in the show notes, but wanted to give them a
shout out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Serious.
All right. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for your time and for being a part of Psychedelic Divas. It's been a delight to have you on.
It's really fun. Yeah, thank you, Carla. I really appreciate it. I remember you asking a few months ago, and we talked about it a little bit. So here we are. And
here we are. And I love it. So
it's really great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. If you found this conversation to be helpful in any way, please, right now, stop your multitasking and take a moment to go to wherever you're listening or watching and click on the 5 stars or provide a nice comment or a thumbs up. Feeding the algorithms in a positive way helps other people find our content. And that's how we spread the word and helpful, safe information about the psychedelic world. And speaking of safety, I've been getting positive feedback on my safety guide, which includes critical information about what to do when things go wrong. So please check it out at our website, psychedelicdivas.com. It might be just the thing you need should things go sideways. As always, thank you all for your support and for listening. I so appreciate it. And thanks again, Wendy.
Thank you.